She bought the old bakery to start over, then met the man who refused to leave. 3 days after signing her divorce papers, Lucy Bennett bought a failing bakery. Everyone she knew thought it was a terrible idea. Her sister called it a grief purchase. Her former boss called it a career-ending detour. Her accountant called it financially adventurous, which was accountant language for please reconsider. Lucy bought it anyway. Because after spending 6 years building a life that looked successful from the outside and felt increasingly empty from the inside, she wanted something real, even if real came with leaking pipes. The bakery sat on the corner of Main Street in Cedar Cove, a small coastal town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business before breakfast. The faded sign above the storefront read, "Eleanor's Bakery." The paint was peeling. One of the front windows had a crack running through the corner. The flower boxes outside were mostly weeds, and Lucy loved it immediately. Not because it was beautiful, because it wasn't. The place had survived decades of storms, changing owners, economic downturns, and apparently several wars against proper maintenance. It felt stubborn. At that moment, stubborn felt comforting. Lucy climbed out of her SUV and stood on the sidewalk with a folder tucked under one arm. Inside that folder was everything she had left: the deed, the renovation plans, the loan documents, and the terrifying proof that she had invested nearly every remaining dollar she owned into a bakery she had only seen twice. A seagull landed on the sign, looked directly at her, then promptly relieved itself on the sidewalk. "Good morning to you, too," Lucy muttered. She unlocked the front door. The bell above it jingled weakly. Inside, the bakery smelled faintly of cinnamon, old wood, and years of memories nobody had bothered to remove. Dust floated through the sunlight. Display cases stood empty. The espresso machine looked old enough to remember dial-up internet. But beneath the neglect, Lucy could see it. Fresh paint, new menus, customers, life. For the first time in months, something inside her felt hopeful. She spent nearly 2 hours walking through the building with a notebook. The kitchen needed work. The plumbing definitely needed work. The oven appeared to be surviving through personal determination rather than engineering. But none of it scared her. What scared her was standing still. Eventually, she reached the narrow staircase leading upstairs. The previous owner's lawyer had told her the second floor had been used mostly for storage. Lucy planned to convert it into office space later. She climbed the stairs. The wood creaked beneath her feet. At the top, she found a hallway, then a kitchen, then a living room, then the unmistakable sound of a shower running. Lucy froze. The shower stopped. A few seconds later, a door opened somewhere down the hall. Lucy stared. A man walked into the kitchen carrying a towel around his neck. He was tall, dark-haired, 30-something, and clearly not a piece of furniture. For several seconds, neither moved. The man looked at her, then at the folder in her hands, then back at her. "Can I help you?" Lucy blinked. "Can I help you?" His eyebrows lifted. Interesting. He looked irritatingly calm. Like finding strangers in his kitchen happened often enough to be mildly inconvenient but not alarming. "I live here," he said. "No, you don't." "Yes, I do." Lucy laughed once. Not because anything was funny, because surely this was some absurd misunderstanding. "I bought this building." The man stared, then pointed toward the floor. "The bakery? The whole building?" "No." "Yes." "No." That's generally how property sales work. The man rubbed a hand over his face. "This is ridiculous." "I completely agree." For a moment they simply stood there. Two strangers equally convinced the other had lost their mind. Finally, the man sighed. "Owen Carter. Lucy Bennett. Nice to meet you." "It really isn't." That almost made him smile. Almost. Instead, he reached for his phone. "Let's call somebody." 20 minutes later, they were sitting at the small kitchen table with a lawyer on speakerphone. The conversation became steadily worse. For Lucy, then for Owen, then somehow for both of them. A clause buried deep in the purchase agreement gave Owen legal residential rights to the upstairs apartment, a clause Lucy had missed, a clause her lawyer had apparently missed too, a clause connected to an arrangement made years earlier between Owen's grandmother and the property trust. The result was simple. Lucy owned the building. Owen could legally continue living there. For 6 more months, silence filled the apartment after the call ended. Lucy stared at the contract, then at the ceiling, then back at the contract as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less disastrous. They did not. She had spent nearly everything she had. Her marriage was gone. Her career was gone. Her savings were mostly gone. And now the fresh start she had imagined came with an unexpected adult man attached to it. A very real adult man, who was currently drinking coffee in her kitchen. Technically his kitchen. Temporarily. Maybe. Lucy suddenly felt a headache forming. This can't be happening. It's happening, Owen said. I bought a bakery. You bought a bakery with a tenant. You're not a tenant. You're right. Owen looked far too comfortable delivering the next blow. A tenant would pay rent. Lucy closed her eyes. For one brief second she considered crying. For another brief second she considered murder. Instead she took a deep breath, then another, then opened her notebook. Owen watched her. What are you doing? Making a renovation schedule. He blinked. Right now? Yes. You just discovered a stranger is living in your building. Lucy flipped a page. You just discovered the stranger isn't leaving. Fair point. For the first time, Owen studied her more carefully. Most people would have panicked. Some would have tried threatening lawyers. Others would have immediately attempted negotiation. Lucy Bennett opened a notebook. That was somehow more dangerous. Across the table, Lucy started writing a list. Paint, floors, lighting, kitchen equipment, grand reopening. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't backing down either. And as Owen watched her filling page after page with determined handwriting, one realization slowly settled over him. This woman had just bet her entire future on this bakery, which meant one thing. She was absolutely not going to quit, and for the first time all morning, that worried him. By Monday morning, Lucy had stopped thinking of Owen Carter as the man upstairs. He was now the man everywhere. He appeared when she measured the front windows. He appeared when she tested cabinet doors. He appeared when she stood in the middle of the bakery holding 6 paint swatches and wondering whether warm cream and buttermilk cloud were legally different colors. Owen never said she could not change things. That would have been easier to argue with. Instead, he leaned against door frames, crossed his arms, and made small, devastating observations. The new sign was too modern. The proposed menu board looked like it belonged in a dentist's office. The pendant lights were impractical. The paint color was too cold. The new logo, in his opinion, made the bakery look like it sold expensive soap. Lucy had worked in marketing for 7 years. She had sat in conference rooms with men who used the phrase brand journey without shame. She had survived divorce mediation with a lawyer who smiled like a shark in reading glasses. And somehow, one carpenter with sawdust on his boots was testing her more than all of them combined. The problem was that Owen was not always wrong. That made him unbearable. When she chose a sleek black and white sign that read Bennett Bakery, Owen stared at it for so long she nearly threw a tape measure at him. The old bakery had been called Eleanor's for 42 years. People in Cedar Cove still gave directions using it as a landmark. Turn left at Eleanor's. Meet me by Eleanor's. Get the cinnamon rolls before Eleanor sells out. Lucy told herself a new beginning needed a new name. Owen said nothing. He only looked at the empty space where his grandmother's sign had hung and went upstairs. That silence irritated her more than criticism would have. By Wednesday, the town had noticed. Cedar Cove noticed everything. Diane Miller, who owned the flower shop across the street, became the unofficial commentator of the renovation. She watched from behind buckets of tulips with the serious expression of a sports analyst. By lunchtime, half the town seemed to know Lucy had painted one test wall pale gray. By 2 o'clock, 3 customers had wandered in just to say hello and casually asked whether Owen had survived the color choice. By 4, someone at the hardware store had started a betting pool. Lucy learned about it from Diane, who brought over a vase of daisies and did not even pretend the visit was innocent. The categories were simple. Would Lucy keep the new sign? Would Owen apologize first? Would they kill each other before opening day? Would they fall in love before or after the plumbing inspection? Lucy nearly choked on her coffee. Diane only patted her hand and said small towns needed hobbies. The work continued. The bakery fought back. A cabinet door fell off in Lucy's hands. The espresso machine hissed at her like it had moral objections. A ceiling tile collapsed into a bucket she had fortunately placed there for a different leak. Owen fixed what he could and muttered at the rest. Lucy began to notice the way he touched the building. Not possessively exactly, tenderly. He knew which floorboard near the back door dipped in the middle. He knew the oven needed 10 minutes longer than its dial claimed. He knew the front window stuck in damp weather but would open if lifted from the left side. He knew the bakery the way people know family members, by the small adjustments love makes over time. And Owen, despite his opinions, began noticing things about Lucy too. She arrived before sunrise and stayed after dark. She took notes on every repair estimate. She learned the names of customers who peeked through the glass. She kept a jar on the counter labeled, "Things that will not defeat me," and by Friday it contained a broken hinge, 2 dead light bulbs, and 1 handwritten note reading Owen's facial expressions. He saw her sitting alone on the floor one night, surrounded by invoices, rubbing the pale line where her wedding ring had been. After that, he stopped calling her city girl. Not out loud, anyway. The flower incident happened on Saturday. Lucy had been inventorying the storage room, which was barely large enough for one person and smelled like paper bags, yeast, and old panic. The door had always stuck. Owen had warned her. She had heard him. She had also ignored him, because he warned her about everything. When the door slammed shut behind her, the latch jammed. Lucy tried the handle. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. A bag of flour leaned ominously on the shelf beside her. She reached for her phone and discovered no service. Of course. 20 minutes later, Owen heard the thumping. By the time he forced the door open, Lucy had attempted to climb the shelves, knocked over 2 bags of flour, and looked like she had been defeated in battle by a very pale ghost. Owen stared. Lucy stood in the doorway, covered from hair to boots in white powder. Then the damaged shelf gave one last tragic creak. A 3rd bag dropped directly onto Owen's shoulder. It exploded. For 3 seconds, they only looked at each other. Then Lucy laughed. Not politely, not carefully. She laughed so hard she had to grip the doorframe. Owen tried to stay serious. Failed. The sound of his laughter surprised her. It was warm, rough, and younger than his face usually looked. Across the street, Diane appeared in the flower shop window, saw them both, and immediately lifted her phone. By evening, half the town had heard that the bakery war had escalated to chemical warfare. That night, after they cleaned the worst of the flour from the floor, Lucy found Owen sanding the old wooden counter instead of replacing it. She had planned to throw it out. Now she watched his hands move carefully over the scarred surface. The counter was scratched, stained, uneven. But beneath the damage, the wood was beautiful. Lucy understood then that Owen was not trying to stop her from building something new. He was afraid she would erase everything that had mattered before. And Owen, watching her trace one hand over the sanded grain, realized something of his own. Lucy Bennett had not come to Cedar Cove to destroy the bakery. She had come because something in her had been destroyed too. Maybe they were not fighting over wood and paint after all. Maybe they were both trying to prove that broken things could still become home. Lucy found the recipe box because the old sugar shelf collapsed. By then, disasters in Eleanor's bakery had developed a rhythm. Something groaned, snapped, leaked, smoked, or surrendered every day around 3 in the afternoon, as if the building needed a scheduled emotional breakdown. This time, it was a wooden shelf behind the counter. Lucy reached for a bag of sugar. The bracket gave up. Sugar slid forward in a soft white landslide, and behind it, tucked into a gap in the wall, was a blue tin box covered in faded roses. Owen was repairing the front door hinge when she brought it out. The moment he saw it, he stopped. Lucy knew that expression now. It was the look he wore when the past stepped into the room without warning. Inside the box were recipe cards. Some were neat, some were stained with butter, some had corrections written in the margins. Eleanor's apple crumb pie, Sunday lemon rolls, rainy day molasses cookies. Beneath the recipes were envelopes, unsealed, unsent. Most were addressed to Owen. Lucy did not touch them after seeing his name. She slid the box toward him. For once, Owen did not make a joke. They spent the next hour sitting at the old counter while he turned the cards over one by one. Each recipe seemed to carry a small piece of Eleanor with it. Her handwriting was firm, slightly slanted, practical in the way women become when they have fed people through grief, birthdays, bad weather, and unpaid bills. Owen told Lucy how Eleanor opened the bakery after her husband died, how she gave free coffee to fishermen on cold mornings, how she pretended not to know which teenagers couldn't afford lunch, how she once banned the mayor for calling her cinnamon rolls overrated, then let him back in 2 days later because his wife apologized better than he did. Lucy listened, not as the new owner, as someone being introduced to the soul of a place she had bought before fully understanding it. They began testing the recipes that week. At first, it was research. That was what Lucy called it because research sounded safer than tenderness. They made lemon rolls on Tuesday, molasses cookies on Wednesday. On Thursday, they attempted Eleanor's famous apple crumb pie. The recipe looked simple. That was the first warning. Owen claimed he had watched his grandmother make it 100 times. Lucy pointed out that watching and baking were very different skills. Owen said he had ancestral pie instincts. The instincts failed almost immediately. The apples were too wet. The crust tore. Lucy misread one faded note and added twice the cinnamon. Owen set the oven too high because Eleanor's old temperature dial apparently operated on vibes and betrayal. 20 minutes later, smoke rolled out of the kitchen like the building was electing a pope. The alarm screamed. Lucy grabbed a towel. Owen grabbed the ruined pie. Diane appeared outside the front window with the calm readiness of a woman who had been waiting for this. The Cedar Cove Fire Department arrived 3 minutes later. Again, the fire chief stepped inside, looked at Owen, then at Lucy, then at the blackened pie sitting on the counter. "Second time this month," he said. Lucy coughed. "We're developing a relationship with emergency services." Owen lifted the pie pan. "Technically, this is food." The chief stared at it. "No." By sunset, the bakery smelled like smoke, cinnamon, and defeat. Lucy expected Owen to retreat upstairs. Instead, he sat beside her on the kitchen floor with 2 spoons and the middle of the pie, which had somehow survived under the burned top. It was ugly, too sweet, overspiced, still warm. They ate it anyway. Lucy laughed with cinnamon on her sleeve. Owen laughed too, quieter but real. For a moment, the bakery did not feel like a battlefield or a business risk. It felt alive. Later that night, after Owen went upstairs, Lucy returned to the blue tin box to put the recipe cards away. One envelope had slipped beneath the counter during the chaos. She picked it up. For Owen, when the bakery gets too quiet. She hesitated, then carried it upstairs. Owen opened the door before she knocked twice. She handed him the letter. He read it standing in the doorway. At first his face softened, then it changed. Lucy wished she could look away, but she couldn't. Eleanor's words were not cruel. That made them worse. She had written that she loved him for staying, for fixing the roof, for sleeping upstairs when her breathing became bad, for making her soup when she forgot how hungry she was. But then came the line that undid him. "Don't turn this bakery into my grave, Owen." His hand tightened around the paper. Lucy stood very still. He kept reading. Eleanor had known. She had known he was not only caring for her, he was hiding, hiding from a life beyond duty, hiding from change, hiding from the possibility that if he left, there would be no place left where he belonged. I hope one day you love this place enough to leave it. Owen lowered the letter. The hallway felt too narrow for the silence between them. Lucy wanted to say something comforting. But comfort, she was beginning to learn, could be another way of rushing someone past the truth. Owen folded the letter with careful hands. "She wanted me gone," he said. "No," Lucy said softly. "She wanted you free." He looked at her then, and the hurt in his eyes was raw. For years, he had believed staying was the proof of love. Now the woman he loved most had left him a different definition. And Lucy understood something painful as she stood there with flour still under her fingernails and cinnamon in her hair. Sometimes the hardest thing to lose was not a person. It was the story you had built to survive losing them. After the letter, something changed. Not all at once. Owen did not suddenly become cheerful, and Lucy did not suddenly understand how to run a bakery without Googling phrases like, "Why does bread collapse emotionally?" But the war ended. Quietly. One morning, Lucy found Owen downstairs before sunrise, sanding the old counter he had once silently defended. Beside him was a fresh sketch for the bakery sign. Not Bennett Bakery, not only Eleanor's. The design read, "Eleanor's Bakery, reopened by Lucy Bennett." Lucy stared at it longer than she meant to. It was not surrender. It was an invitation. They reopened 2 weeks later. Nothing was perfect. The front door still stuck when it rained. The espresso machine had moods. The new display lights flickered if anyone plugged in the toaster at the wrong time. But customers came. Old fishermen arrived before dawn and pretended they were only there for coffee. Mothers stopped in after school drop-off. Teenagers bought cookies and sat near the window where Eleanor used to leave day-old muffins for kids who forgot lunch money. Lucy learned names. She learned who liked extra butter, who hated raisins, who came in more for company than pastry. Each morning, Owen repaired something. Each afternoon, Lucy ruined something smaller than the day before. Cedar Cove noticed. Diane declared from across the street that the bakery had romantic tension and acceptable croissants, which apparently counted as a 5-star review. Lucy began to stand differently behind the counter, less like a woman defending a reckless decision, more like a woman building a life. Owen saw it. She saw changes in him too. He laughed more easily, stayed downstairs after closing, told stories about Eleanor without looking like every memory cost him something. Sometimes, when the bakery got busy, he moved behind the counter to help, clumsy with the register but gentle with customers who still expected to see his grandmother there. They became a team by accident, then by habit, then by choice. The power went out on a Friday night during a storm. Wind rattled the front windows. Rain washed the street silver. The bakery had closed an hour earlier, but Lucy was still testing cinnamon rolls for the next morning, because she had become the sort of person who had opinions about dough elasticity. The lights snapped off. Lucy froze in the dark. From somewhere near the storage room came Owen's voice, calm and dry. "Before you panic, the building is only mildly haunted." I wasn't panicking. You said, "Oh no," in 3 syllables. That was strategic. They found candles in Eleanor's old emergency drawer, along with matches, rubber bands, and a handwritten note that read, "If the power goes out, do not trust the oven. It lies." They laughed at that longer than the joke deserved. With the mixers dead and the oven unreliable, they should have stopped. Instead, they worked by candlelight, not efficiently, not professionally, but beautifully, in a way Lucy would remember later when life became complicated again. The bakery glowed amber. Rain beat softly against the glass. Owen kneaded dough while Lucy measured filling. Their shadows moved across the walls, crossing and separating, crossing again. Somewhere between flour and candle wax, Lucy told him about Mark. Not the simple version, not the clean version people preferred after a divorce. She told him how the marriage had faded quietly, how there had been no dramatic betrayal, No one terrible enough to blame. Just two people becoming polite strangers who shared a mortgage, dinner reservations, and fewer honest conversations each year. She admitted that the hardest part had not been losing Mark. It had been realizing how long she had stayed, because leaving would make her look like someone who failed. Owen listened without trying to rescue the story. Then he told her about his parents leaving Cedar Cove when he was 19 and never really coming back except for holidays that felt like appointments. About Eleanor getting sick. About how staying had seemed simple at first, necessary, noble even. But somewhere along the way, duty had become identity. He had become the man who stayed, and after Eleanor died, he had not known who he was without someone to be needed by. Lucy understood that ache. Different shape, same weight. The storm deepened. The cinnamon rolls came out slightly uneven, baked in the old gas oven. Owen insisted he could manage, despite Eleanor's warning. They were too dark on the bottom and perfect in the middle. Lucy broke one apart with her fingers. Steam rose between them. Owen took a bite and closed his eyes. "Don't look so emotional," Lucy said. "I'm having a private moment with butter." She laughed. A smear of cinnamon stuck near the corner of his mouth. Without thinking, Lucy reached up and wiped it away with her thumb. The smallness of the gesture made the room go still. Owen opened his eyes. Neither of them moved. The rain, the candles, the old bakery, the grief, the flower, the beginning again feeling of it all seemed to gather around them. When Owen kissed her, it was careful, almost a question. Lucy answered by stepping closer. It was not a perfect kiss. Their hands were flowery. A candle nearly went out. Somewhere in the dark, the espresso machine made a suspicious click, but it was honest. And after years of a life polished smooth on the outside and hollow underneath, honest felt more romantic than perfect ever had. Then Lucy's laptop chimed. Both of them startled apart. The power had flickered back just enough for the screen on the counter to glow. An email notification sat in the corner. From Mark. Lucy stared at the name. The subject line was simple. "Can we talk?" The bakery felt suddenly colder. Owen saw the name too. He did not say anything. That was worse. Lucy looked at him, still close enough to feel the warmth of the kiss fading between them. For one fragile second, the new life she was building and the old life she had left stood in the same room, and neither one was willing to disappear quietly. Mark arrived in Cedar Cove on a gray Tuesday morning. Lucy saw him through the bakery window before he saw her. He stood across the street with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the sign, the flower shop, the narrow sidewalk, the ocean mist hanging over everything. He looked out of place, not in an arrogant way, just like a man from another chapter who had accidentally walked onto the wrong page. For a moment, Lucy was 26 again, standing in their Seattle apartment beside unopened takeout, waiting for a conversation neither of them knew how to begin. Then the bell above the door rang. Mark stepped inside. Owen was behind the counter fixing the register drawer, but the moment he saw Mark, his movements slowed. Lucy felt it. The room noticing. Diane noticing from across the street, probably through binoculars. Mark removed his coat. "Hi, Lucy." His voice was gentle, not possessive, not dramatic. That somehow made her more nervous. They sat at a small table near the window. Lucy brought coffee because she needed something to do with her hands. Mark looked around the bakery. "This place suits you," he said. Lucy almost laughed. A month ago, she would have called that impossible. Now she believed him. Mark did not ask her to come back. That was the first surprise. He did not say he had made a mistake, did not make promises about counseling or second chances, did not turn their history into a courtroom where someone had to win. Instead, he apologized. For the silence, for the way they had both smiled through a marriage that was already leaving, for letting her become the organized, dependable center of a life neither of them truly wanted anymore. Lucy apologized too, not because she had failed, because she had pretended failing was impossible. They spoke for nearly an hour. By the time Mark left, nothing had been repaired. But something had been released. Owen was gone from behind the counter. For the next few days, he became polite. Polite was worse than angry. He fixed the loose shelf, stacked firewood, checked the back door latch, and avoided being alone with Lucy for more than 5 minutes. The easy rhythm between them cracked. Lucy tried to reach for it. Owen stepped around it. She found him one evening loading tools into his truck. He said he had work across town. There was always work across town now. Lucy understood then that he had seen Mark and created an ending before she had chosen one. But before she could confront him, the past knocked a second time. An email arrived from her old company in Seattle. The subject line was clean, professional, and dangerous. Senior Director Opportunity. The job came with a title she once wanted badly, a salary that could erase her financial panic, health insurance, stability, a version of herself that people understood. Lucy read the offer 3 times while the bakery cooled around her. The timing felt cruel, or maybe honest. That same night, Owen came downstairs carrying 2 boxes. Lucy stood behind the counter with the email still open on her laptop. He saw the screen. She saw the boxes. Neither needed to ask. Owen spoke first. "I found a place." The words hit harder than she expected. "Where?" "Small cabin near the North Road. Needs work." "Of course it does." A faint smile almost appeared, then vanished. He looked tired, not angry anymore, just resolved in a way that frightened her. "My grandmother was right," he said. "I turned this place into proof that I loved her, but she didn't ask me to live in a memory forever." Lucy's throat tightened. "You don't have to leave tonight." "I know, but he was going to. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon." And Lucy, with a job offer glowing on the screen behind her, realized the terrible symmetry of it. Owen was finally leaving because he had learned to let go. Lucy might leave because the old life had learned how to call her back. For the first time since she bought the bakery, they were not fighting over the same place. They were standing at the edge of 2 different futures. Owen looked at the laptop again. "You should take it if you want it." Lucy hated how calm he sounded. "What if I don't know what I want?" He nodded slowly. "Then you should find out without me standing in the doorway." There it was again, his instinct to step back before he could be left. Lucy wanted to tell him that Mark had not come to reclaim her, that Seattle no longer felt like home, that the job offer felt less like a dream and more like a test. But Owen picked up the boxes before she could find the words. At the door, he paused. "This bakery is yours now, Lucy." Then he left. The bell above the door gave its small, sad jingle. Lucy stood alone in the warm, dim bakery. Behind her, the laptop waited with a future she used to want. Above her, Owen's apartment waited half-packed. Around her, Eleanor's walls held the smell of bread, cinnamon, smoke, and every unfinished thing. Lucy had come to Cedar Cove to start over. Now starting over was asking her what she was brave enough to keep. Lucy did not answer the Seattle offer right away. For 3 days, she let it sit in her inbox like a clean, sensible door. She imagined the salary, the apartment, the meetings, the polished version of herself walking back into rooms where no one smelled like flour and no one fixed chairs with a pencil behind one ear. It would be easy to explain. People understood promotions. They did not always understand bakeries bought after heartbreak. But on the 4th morning, Lucy stood alone behind the counter before opening, watching the first batch of bread rise in the oven. The bakery was quiet, not empty. Quiet in the way a place becomes when it is waiting to be lived in. She thought of Mark, and felt gratitude instead of longing. She thought of Seattle, and felt distance. She thought of Owen, and felt pain. But pain was not the reason she stayed. That mattered. She declined the job before sunrise. Her hands shook when she clicked send, but afterward, something inside her settled. Not perfectly, but honestly. Later that afternoon, while cleaning the upstairs apartment Owen had nearly emptied, Lucy found one last envelope tucked behind a loose kitchen tile. It was addressed simply, For the one who thinks leaving means losing. Lucy sat on the bare floor and opened it. Eleanor's handwriting was weaker than in the earlier letters, but still unmistakably hers. The letter was short. Home is not the place where you keep the dead from leaving. Home is the place you want to come back to with the living. Lucy read the words twice, then a third time. By evening, Owen's truck was parked behind the bakery, half loaded with boxes. He carried a lamp down the back stairs, moving carefully. Like every ordinary object weighed more than it should. Lucy stood at the bottom. He stopped when he saw her. Neither of them spoke at first. She held up the letter. Owen's face changed. "She left one more," Lucy said. He took it slowly. "Read it." For a long moment, all the sounds of Cedar Cove seemed to fade. Gulls overhead, Diane sweeping outside the flower shop, someone laughing down the street. When Owen looked up, his eyes were wet. "I thought leaving meant I finally understood her," he said. "Maybe it does." Lucy stepped closer. "But leaving doesn't have to mean disappearing." He looked at the boxes in his truck. "I don't know where I'm going yet." Lucy smiled softly. "Good." He blinked. "Why?" "Because I'd like to be part of figuring that out." The words stood between them, simple and terrifying. Owen searched her face, as if checking for panic, pity, or some leftover need to be rescued. He found none. Only Lucy. The woman who had bought a broken bakery because her own life had broken. The woman who had stayed long enough to learn what was worth keeping. He reached for her hand. This time, neither of them stepped back. The next morning, Eleanor's bakery opened at 6. The smell of fresh bread drifted down Main Street before the sun fully cleared the rooftops. Lucy stood behind the counter, tying an apron around her waist, telling herself she was not nervous, even though she had rearranged the lemon rolls 4 times. Owen knelt near the window, fixing a wobbly wooden chair that had annoyed him for weeks. "You know customers sit in those," Lucy said. "That is why I'm fixing it." "You said that chair had character." It had a limp. Across the street, Diane pressed her face to the flower shop window, saw Owen inside before opening hours, and threw both hands in the air. A minute later, she came storming in with a bouquet under one arm. "I won the bet," she announced. Lucy stared at her. "There was still a bet?" "There is always a bet." Owen did not look up from the chair. "Did we at least have good odds?" Diane smiled. "Terrible." Everyone knew. Lucy blushed. Owen finally looked up at her and smiled. Outside, Cedar Cove began its morning. Coffee poured. Bread cooled. The bell above the door rang again and again. No one said the bakery was saved forever. No one pretended love solved plumbing, grief, debt, or fear. But the place was warm and alive and full of people who wanted to return. For the first time in a long time, Lucy was not trying to erase the life she had lost. Owen was not trying to live inside one that had ended. They were too busy building something new, something imperfect, something with cracked floors, fresh bread, old letters, and room enough for both memory and hope, a place to belong. Before you go, take a moment to think about what this story is really about. At first, it seems like a story about a bakery. Then it becomes a story about a love story that slowly grows between 2 wounded people. But underneath all of that, it's really a story about letting go. Lucy thought starting over meant finding a new place. Owen thought honoring the past meant never leaving it behind. Both of them were wrong, because healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about carrying it differently. Sometimes we hold on to old dreams, old heartbreaks, old identities, and even old grief, because we're afraid that if we let go, we're betraying the people we loved or the person we used to be. But as Eleanor understood, and as Lucy and Owen eventually learned, love doesn't ask us to stay trapped in yesterday. It asks us to keep living. And maybe that's one of the hardest lessons in life. The people we lose don't need us to stop moving forward. The people who truly love us want us to keep growing, keep risking, keep building, and keep finding reasons to be happy. Here's a POV that stayed with me after this story. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on. Sometimes the bravest thing is opening the door, stepping into the unknown, and trusting that what mattered most will come with you. Not as a burden, but as a part of who you've become. So here's a question for you. Have you ever held on to something, whether it was a relationship, a dream, a memory, or a version of yourself long after it was time to let go, and what finally helped you move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone who is standing at that same crossroads right now. And if this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes it's a choice. And sometimes it's the life you finally have the courage to build.